This looked like a love story, but it wasn't. The alien princess rose from her crystal throne, her golden hair shining under 3 suns, and began to unfasten the silver clasps on her royal armor. To anyone watching, it looked like a proposal, an intimate ritual between a ruler and her protector. But the truth was sharper. She wasn't offering affection. She was testing loyalty. The human bodyguard, trained to read danger instead of desire, didn't move. He stood steady, his eyes locked forward, his breathing calm. Around them, the palace court froze in silence, waiting for him to fail. The translator in his ear had died hours ago, leaving him deaf to the alien language and alone in a room full of predators. Yet he didn't flinch. The princess kept undoing her clasps, eyes bright with calculation, and whispered words he couldn't understand. The courtiers laughed softly, expecting him to break protocol, to glance away or react like any man would. But he stayed still. That was the point. The princess wasn't testing his courage. She was measuring his control. The last clasp clicked open, her bioluminescent skin glowing with soft violet light. She watched him for a long, heavy moment, then smiled faintly and began closing each clasp again, one by one. It wasn't a proposal at all. It was a message. Someone in the court wanted her dead, and this was how she decided who she could trust. The human had passed without saying a word. The translator's failure wasn't an accident. 6 hours ago, a solar flare had wiped out every backup device, leaving the human blind to the court's secret language. Somewhere in that crowd, among the jeweled advisors and smiling generals, someone was waiting for the perfect signal to strike. The human's silence had bought him a fragile kind of trust, but it also painted a target on his back. If he failed to uncover the traitor, the princess would be dead within days. And if she died, the capital would fall. 40 enemy ships waited beyond the atmosphere, engines burning cold, ready to descend the moment the sapphire throne went dark. One wrong move, one misread word, and the entire empire would collapse before sunrise. The human bodyguard didn't just guard her life anymore. He guarded the balance of 2 worlds. The palace was alive with noise, yet inside the throne room there was a silence heavy enough to crush air. The human bodyguard stood 3 steps behind the princess, weight balanced, hand near his weapon. The courtiers whispered in the alien tongue, soft words that sounded like wind through glass. He couldn't understand them, but he didn't need to. He could feel the tension twisting through the air. Every motion in the crowd was too sharp, too careful. Every smile hid something else. The princess's glow shifted faintly beneath her blue skin, violet waves pulsing from her collarbone to her hands. He had learned that color in the last 3 weeks. Violet meant calculation. She was thinking. Her golden eyes slid toward him, and for a breath, it felt like the room was waiting for a spark. Then, without warning, she stood. She moved with a kind of slow grace that belonged to predators. Her voice carried through the room, clear but musical, and the courtiers began to file out in obedience. When the last of them left, she turned back to him. Her hands reached again for the clasps of her armor. The soft click echoed like a heartbeat. 1 clasp, 2, 3, the air felt electric. He didn't react, didn't move, didn't speak. His pulse stayed steady, the way it always had when the world narrowed to a single decision: fight, freeze, or fall. Her glow shifted from violet to a hint of gold. She was watching him not as a princess, but as a soldier watching another. Then she gestured sharply to his translator, lying dead at his belt, and drew a line across her throat. He understood. Trust no one. For the first time, her expression softened. She wasn't his target or his employer anymore. She was his mission. The alien court had become a maze of smiling assassins, and he had only one ally, a woman who tested trust by pretending to seduce him. He nodded once, barely moving. She exhaled in relief. Outside the walls, thunder rolled, not from the sky, but from orbit, where fleets waited in silence. The test was over. The war behind it was only beginning. The night came with 3 moons and the sound of distant storms. The palace guards stood at their posts, glowing armor reflecting the soft blue light from the marble walls. Inside the princess's quarters, the human bodyguard moved in silence. He had already set up his traps, Thin threads of dental wire stretched across entry points, motion sensors built from scraps of his broken translator, and micro-detectors powered by the leftover charge from his prosthetic arm. It wasn't much, but it was enough to give warning before death came through the window. The princess watched him work from her bed, her body half covered by a sheer gown that shimmered like oil on water. Her bioluminescence pulsed in slow curiosity as she tracked his movements. She said something soft in her own language, a question maybe, or a test. He looked up, met her golden eyes, and simply shook his head. He wasn't there to talk. He was there to keep her alive. When he finished, he sat near the door with his sidearm across his knees. The palace was too quiet, too perfect. That kind of quiet always came before violence, then motion. A shadow rippled across the ceiling. The wire trembled. He didn't think. He moved. The assassin dropped from the chandelier like liquid shadow, blade gleaming silver blue. The human rolled, grabbed a shard of the broken translator from the floor, and hurled it with perfect precision. It hit the chandelier's main joint. Metal screamed. The structure fell with a crash that shook the marble tiles. The assassin tried to grab the rope to escape, but it was too late. The impact threw them sideways, straight through the balcony doors and into the dark gardens below. When silence returned, the princess stood by the window, her glow flashing red gold in alarm. Her claws were out, her breathing sharp. The human was already up, sidearm raised, scanning the corners for more movement. She looked at him for a long moment, this quiet man who had just destroyed her chandelier without hesitation, and then her glow softened to a calm, steady gold. That color meant respect. She spoke one word in her tongue. He didn't understand it, but her tone said enough. It was approval. Outside, the palace alarms wailed. Somewhere deep in the corridors, courtiers were already whispering lies, preparing questions, spinning stories about what had just happened. The human didn't answer any of them. He simply checked his weapon, replaced the shard in his pocket, and met the princess's gaze again. The mission was still alive. The assassin had failed, but that meant more were coming, and now both of them knew it. Morning came too bright, too calm, like the world had forgotten someone tried to kill its princess the night before. The courtiers returned to their usual routines, pretending nothing had happened. But the bodyguard could see the changes, the extra guards at the doors, the nervous glances, the tension hidden behind smiles. The palace had become a stage for liars. During the debrief, the princess said nothing. She only watched him, her glow shifting through pale gold and thoughtful violet. He couldn't understand her words, but he could read her body. Every movement meant something in her world. Every color was language. When the room emptied, she called him closer. The translator was still dead, so he could only follow her gestures. She touched her throat, her nose, and then pointed to him. Her glow flickered in confusion. She leaned forward, close enough for him to feel her breath, and inhaled. Her pupils widened. She sniffed again, slower this time, then looked at him with what could only be disbelief. No scent. In her culture, scent was everything. Status, emotion, truth. Their bodies spoke through chemicals, invisible messages carried in the air. But the human had none. No pheromones, no trace of belonging. To them, he was a blank space, a void where communication died. She stepped back, her glow fading to puzzled blue. Then, slowly, realization crossed her face. A blank scent meant no manipulation, no loyalty markers, no hidden allegiances. It meant freedom. He wasn't just foreign, he was untouchable. For the first time, her glow brightened into something warm. She tapped her temple, pointed to his broken translator, and then to her mouth. She wanted to teach him her language herself. He nodded once. The unspoken agreement passed between them like an electric current. Later that night, when the palace grew quiet again, the princess sat by the balcony light, tracing symbols on a glass tablet. She wrote the words for sky, guard, and trust, and he repeated them softly until his accent stopped breaking them apart. She smiled, the first real smile since he arrived. The space between them was still dangerous, but it had changed. It wasn't just duty anymore. It was understanding built through silence. And in a palace full of voices that lied, Silence was the most honest language of all. Night fell again, heavy and electric. The palace lights dimmed to a soft silver, and the air hummed with quiet danger. The human was checking the balcony sensors when the first sound hit, a low vibration that ran through the marble floor and made his teeth ache. It wasn't thunder. It was something worse. The second vibration shattered a column beside the window. Dust and shards exploded across the room. The princess froze mid-sentence, her glow flashing blood red. Without thinking, the human grabbed her by the waist and pulled her to the ground, just as another invisible blast tore through the wall where she had been standing. Sonic weapons, high-frequency lances that turned bone to powder, silent killers, designed for assassinations. He moved fast, scanning the room. 3 impacts, 3 directions, snipers from the gardens. The fountains outside were running, their water throwing soft echoes into the air. He remembered something from training. Moving water could bend sound. He reached behind the wall tile where he had hidden one of his small explosives. The princess's eyes widened, but she didn't stop him. She trusted him now, or maybe she was too shocked to argue. He sprinted for the balcony, threw the charge toward the largest fountain, and hit the trigger. The explosion wasn't lethal. It sent a wave of water flying high into the air, spraying across the courtyard. For a heartbeat, everything went still. Then the sonic hum broke apart, scattering into useless echoes. The attackers had lost their target. He raised his weapon, aiming by instinct, and fired 3 times into the dark. 2 figures fell. The third fled into the tunnels below the palace. The princess stood at the edge of the shattered balcony, her gown soaked, her glow blazing in fierce red and gold. Water streamed from her hair and shoulders, dripping onto the broken marble. She looked at him with wild fury, then something else, respect. He pointed to his ear, then to the fountain, miming the sound waves rippling through water. She understood instantly. Her glow shifted again, from battle red to golden admiration. She stepped closer, close enough that he could see the silver freckles across her cheekbones. For the first time, she touched his face. Claws light against his jaw and pressed her forehead to his. In her world, that gesture meant equality. When the guards finally burst in, shouting in panic, the 2 of them were already standing side by side, soldier and princess, soaked, silent, and unbroken. That was the night the court stopped calling him an outsider, and the night the princess started calling him her equal. The festival arrived like a storm dressed in silk. Drums shook the palace floors, and violet lanterns painted the night sky. Every street below glowed with celebration. It was the heat cycle moon, a time when the alien nobles sang, danced, and made alliances sealed with scent and skin. For the princess, it was duty. For assassins, it was opportunity. The human spent the entire day walking the perimeter, checking the sensors he had hidden along the balconies and hallways. He could hear laughter echoing from the gardens, music spilling from every window, but he never slowed down. Festivals were noise, and noise made people blind. When evening came, the princess appeared before the court in her full regalia. Sapphire harness, platinum clasps, and a flowing gown that caught every glint of light. Her glow changed with every step she took, reflecting the moods of those around her. Soft blue with allies, warning red with rivals, careful violet with the chief advisor who smiled too wide. The bodyguard watched from above, unseen among the pillars. He could tell she was playing a dangerous game. Every dance, every word, every glance was a political weapon. The nobles thought the festival was a celebration, but for her, it was survival. By midnight, the court's laughter turned to murmurs. The princess excused herself from her suitors and climbed alone to the private balcony high above the palace. The human was already there, silent as a shadow, scanning the stars for threats. She leaned against the railing, breathing hard, her glow flickering between exhaustion and something deeper, something she was fighting to control. When she spoke, her voice was low, almost trembling, and even though he didn't understand the words, he knew the tone. She was tired of being watched. Then she turned to him and began to unfasten her harness. 1 clasp, 2, 3. Her skin shimmered beneath the triple moons, her glow pulsing soft gold and red. He didn't move, didn't speak. He understood now this wasn't seduction. It was need. Not desire, but release. She wanted to be seen as something more than a weapon or a throne. He took one slow step forward and raised his hand, palm open, offering choice. She hesitated, eyes locked on his. Then slowly she placed her hand in his. Her skin was warm, her pulse fast beneath the glowing freckles. For a long moment they didn't speak. They didn't have to. The air between them said everything words could not. Then the alarm screamed. Red lights flashed across the palace and the night shattered. Guards shouted, drones surged, and the two of them spun toward the noise. The court had mistaken the princess's rising pheromones for an attack. The security system had flagged her own body as a threat. Within seconds, doors sealed, guns turned, and chaos bloomed across the festival. It wasn't just a misunderstanding, it was a warning. The palace was eating itself alive, and somewhere in the noise, the conspirators were already smiling. The palace didn't sleep after the festival. Smoke still hung in the halls, and the scent of burned silk clung to the air. By morning, the princess sat again on her crystal throne, her glow dim but steady. Before her knelt an assassin, one of the attackers from the tunnels below, caught and bound. The courtiers gathered like vultures in glittering robes, whispering in their coded tongue. The human bodyguard stood 3 steps behind the throne, expression cold. The assassin refused to speak. Not a word, not a sound. He only smiled through split lips, his eyes steady on the princess like a man who had already made peace with dying. The chief advisor moved forward, suggesting chemical extraction. The princess's glow flickered disgust. She refused. She didn't want false confessions. She wanted truth. But truth in her language required more than words. It required scent, tone, and nuance the human couldn't follow. Still, he watched. Every twitch, every muscle shift, every glance. He had studied men like this before, back when he was Earth's weapon instead of her shield. When the assassin's eyes darted to the left side of the hall, just once, he knew. He caught the princess's attention with a small motion. She turned, one ear angled toward him. He pointed to the prisoner, then to himself. Her glow pulsed uncertainly, but she nodded. The advisor protested in rapid alien speech, but she silenced him with a single sharp gesture. The bodyguard stepped forward and crouched before the assassin. His voice was quiet, even, but the words that left his mouth were fluent Varelian. "You were trained for loyalty," he said. "But your unit markings are 16 months old. Your fleet, not palace." The assassin's smirk faltered. "Outer territories," the human continued. "Your regent sent you, didn't she? She wants the princess gone before the blockade starts." The entire room went still. The princess's glow froze, violet shifting to red. The assassin's voice cracked like dry stone. 3 weeks, he rasped. "The fleet jumps in 3 weeks. 6 months of blockade until abdication." The human stood and turned toward the throne. His tone was simple. "He's telling the truth." The chief advisor's data threads flared alarm red. He shouted accusations, pointing at the human, spitting words that sounded like betrayal. How could he speak their language? Why had he lied? The princess held up her hand for silence. Her eyes didn't leave the human. Her glow flickered through gold, red, violet, confusion, anger, thought. Finally she spoke, slow and deliberate. "You will explain later," she said, each word in careful broken earth standard. He nodded. In that instant, a fragile line of trust stretched between them again, strained, but unbroken. Because even though she didn't know the whole truth, she knew this. He had risked everything by speaking her tongue, and he had done it to save her life. The throne hall was brighter than ever, but the light felt cold. The princess sat tall on the sapphire throne, every movement deliberate, every breath measured. Around her, the court gathered in neat rows, advisors, generals, merchants, all pretending loyalty while calculating survival. The air was sharp with tension. At the center stood the human bodyguard. He had no weapon now, no translator, no defense but truth. The chief advisor stepped forward, his silver hair gleaming, voice smooth and poisonous. "This human," he declared, "has deceived us all. He speaks our language, hides his nature, and manipulates the princess's trust. What greater evidence of treachery do we need?" A murmur rippled through the nobles. Some looked at the bodyguard with suspicion, others with open hatred. The advisor continued, louder now, feeding on the fear in the room. He arrived just before the assassinations began. He saved her by coincidence. Convenient timing, convenient failures, convenient loyalty. The princess said nothing. Her glow was calm, violet, unreadable. The advisor raised his voice, his data threads flaring amber. Under Varelian law, a foreign agent who hides their identity forfeits protection. I move for immediate detention and interrogation. The silence that followed was heavy enough to bend air. The bodyguard didn't flinch. He just looked at the princess, waiting. Then slowly, she stood. Her movement alone silenced the room. When she spoke, her voice was steady, ringing against the crystal walls. "You present evidence as deception," she said. "But I see something else." She turned toward the gathered nobles, her glow burning brighter. "This human has saved my life 3 times. He exposed a fleet conspiracy before our own intelligence did. He extracted information without torture, without cruelty, without error. You call that manipulation? I call that competence." The advisor's smile cracked. "Princess, if Earth sent him here, then Earth sent the right man," she interrupted. "Because while you argued about protocol, he stopped a war." Gasps filled the hall. The advisor stepped back, caught between outrage and fear. The princess took another step forward, her glow now bright gold. "Explain this to me, advisor. If Earth wanted chaos, why would their agent prevent it? Why would he stop assassins, risk himself, and reveal your own failure?" The advisor's mouth opened, but no words came out. His threads dimmed, flickering uncertainly. The princess turned to the bodyguard. "Tell them how you learned our language." He spoke calmly, his voice carrying just enough to reach every corner. 14 years ago, I worked in Earth's contact division. We embedded among separatists, learning alien tongues to protect refugees. I learned your language to survive. I never used it here until it mattered." He reached into his pocket and held up the dead translator. "This broke during the solar flare. If I'd stayed silent, the princess would have died. I revealed my secret because she trusted me enough to earn it." The room was silent. Even the air seemed to wait. Finally, the princess spoke again. "This court demands loyalty," she said. "But loyalty is not words. It is action, and his actions have saved us all." She turned her gaze to the advisor, her tone like a blade. "Motion denied." A low murmur spread through the nobles. Some relieved, some angry, but none daring to speak. The bodyguard bowed his head slightly. The princess met his eyes, and for a fleeting moment, the war behind her mask softened into something human. When she sat again, the glow of her throne shimmered gold. The court session was over, but the war outside and inside was only beginning. The warning came too soon. The blockade fleet had jumped early. 40 warships now circled the planet like wolves around prey. From the palace tower, the human could see streaks of light burning across the sky, each one a new enemy taking position. The princess didn't hesitate. Within minutes, she ordered the evacuation of the royal docks. They ran through corridors shaking from distant impacts, the walls pulsing with emergency lights. The command officers shouted reports, but the translation lag made them useless. All the human understood was the rhythm of panic and how close it was to breaking. At the docking bay, the princess's personal yacht waited, sleek and unarmed, built for ceremony, not survival. "We'll never outrun them," the pilot warned, his voice trembling. "They have weapons, we have speed." "That's enough," the human said. He climbed into the co-pilot's seat as the engines roared to life. The yacht shot out into open sky, the palace shrinking behind them as the blockade's flagship turned its guns toward them. A blast of plasma fire streaked past their hull, close enough to scorch the paint. The pilot cursed. "What's the plan?" "Run," the human replied, "and when they follow, we make them regret it." He pulled up a holographic schematic of the orbital gardens. massive rings of luxury habitats circling the planet's upper atmosphere. "There," he pointed. "They'll chase us to the gardens. Their engines can't handle rapid gravity shifts that close to a surface." The princess looked at him sharply. "You're going to use the garden's gravity plates?" He nodded. "Cycle them fast enough, and their stabilizers will fail." The yacht hit the gardens at full burn, docking so hard the frame shuddered. The human was out of his seat before the hatch finished opening, prosthetic hand sparking as he hacked into the garden's control panel. The princess followed, plasma lance ready, her glow burning like a signal fire behind him. He could feel the enemy ship locking onto their position. The console screamed warnings in alien script as he bypassed safety locks. 30 seconds, he muttered. The princess fired down the corridor. Guards of the enemy fleet had already breached the outer ring. Plasma bolts lit the walls as she shouted something he didn't need translated. "Hurry!" He triggered the gravity cycle. The floor vanished. The air screamed. The world flipped end over end. Gravity slammed down, then disappeared, then returned twice as hard. Through the glass dome above, he saw the flagship twist mid-air, metal bending under invisible force. Its engines flared, spun, then died. The massive ship tilted, its own weight crushing the docking clamps that had held it steady. The shock troops stumbled, disoriented. The princess struck like lightning, her staff cutting through armor, her movements precise and brutal. The human didn't look away. His hand stayed on the console until the display blinked green, stabilizers offline. 12 minutes, he said. "That's how long the gravity cycles will hold before this place burns out." The princess stepped over the last fallen guard and met his eyes. "Then we use every second." Behind them, the enemy fleet was collapsing, trying to recover formation. Below them, the planet shimmered beneath 3 suns. The princess straightened, her glow fierce and defiant. In 12 minutes, they had turned a doomed flight into a weapon, and now, for the first time, the war was on their terms. The quiet after the gravity trap was worse than the battle. The orbital gardens drifted in half-light, their glass domes cracked and their corridors weightless. Somewhere in that silence, the enemy flagship clung to the station like a dying beast. Then the sensors flared again. A smaller vessel was cutting through the wreckage, coming straight for them. The princess's tail flicked once. "She's coming," she said. Her voice was low but certain. The regent, her aunt, would not send soldiers to finish this. She would come herself to take the throne by blood. The airlock doors hissed open, and 4 armored guards entered first, gravity tethers glowing at their waists. Behind them floated the regent, tall and still, her skin a colder shade of blue, her hair braided tight like armor. "Niece," she called, her tone like glass breaking. "Surrender, and I will let your pet human live." The princess moved between the regent and the bodyguard. Her plasma lance gleamed in the flickering light. "You broke the accords," she said. "You fired on the palace, killed your own people. The court will never accept you." "The court," the regent said, "will obey the one still breathing." Then she lunged. The 2 women collided in midair. Sparks burst across the chamber as lance met blade. The shock threw the human backward into the wall. He spun, fired his weapon, dropping one of the guards, then another. The last 2 adapted fast, switching to plasma rounds that turned the air into fire. He dodged between floating shards of glass, using every piece of cover he could find. In zero gravity, every motion counted. Every mistake killed. He caught a drifting support beam, pushed off, and shot the 3rd guard through the chest. The 4th came from above, blade raised. The human turned, fired point blank, and the body spun away into the void. When he looked back, the fight between the princess and her aunt had turned savage. The regent's blade slashed across the princess's shoulder, dark blood blooming in perfect spheres. The princess gritted her teeth, ignored the pain, and drove her claws into her aunt's face. The regent screamed, blinded, releasing the blade. The princess caught it, reversed the grip, and struck once, clean and final. The regent's body floated, silent, eyes wide, the blood glowing faint gold in the air. The fight was over. The princess's glow dimmed to white, then gold. She was shaking but alive. The human caught her as she started to drift, pressing his hand against her wound. "Stay with me," he said, her eyes focused on his face. "Did we win?" "You did," he said quietly. She smiled weakly. "Good. Because I'm not dying before I make this official." Then she laughed, a soft, broken sound, and passed out in his arms. Outside the cracked dome, the fleet had already seen what happened. The Regent's ship went dark. The blockade broke. The war ended not with surrender, but with one perfect strike in zero gravity. The medics worked in silence. The princess lay pale beneath layers of glowing bandages, her pulse flickering through her skin like starlight. The human stayed beside her through it all, his hands stained with her blood. Outside the window, the wreck of the Regent's ship burned across the atmosphere like a dying comet. When the surgeons finally stepped away, the air in the medical bay was still. The princess's eyes opened, slowly, painfully. "Status," she whispered. He leaned closer. "The blockade fleet is holding position. No new fire. They're waiting." Her fingers twitched against the sheets. "Waiting for what?" "For you," he said. She tried to sit up, failed, and let out a weak laugh. "Then they'll wait a very long time." But he knew that wasn't true. The court would need her voice, the fleet would need her orders, and her silence would be read as death. So he helped her sit, despite the blood that seeped through the dressings, and placed the comm device in her hand. The moment her signal went live, every ship in orbit fell silent. The princess looked straight into the camera, her glow steady now, gold mixed with faint red, pain hidden behind resolve. "Captains of the outer fleet," she said, her voice calm but iron-hard. "You followed my aunt because she promised strength. She is dead, I am not. The succession stands. Lower your weapons and you will live. Continue this war and I will burn every ship that refuses." The silence that followed stretched like wire. Then, one by one, ships powered down their cannons. Engines dimmed. The blockade cracked open. She exhaled and ended the transmission. For a long moment, she didn't speak. Then she turned to him. "You disobeyed orders," she said softly. "You should have left me for the surgeons." He shrugged. "They didn't have what you needed." She blinked. "And what was that?" "Someone who believed you'd live." Her glow softened to pale gold. For the first time since the fighting began, she smiled. Not the sharp smile of politics, but something real. "You're either very brave or very foolish." "Usually both," he said. Her laugh was quiet, genuine. "Then stay near me, brave fool. We still have a court to face." And with that, she leaned back against the pillow, glow fading gently as exhaustion took her. But even half-conscious, her voice carried the weight of command. The fleet had stood down. The enemy was gone. The war was over, for now, but in the halls of the palace, the advisors were already gathering, whispering again, waiting to decide whether their queen had saved them or doomed them. The palace was supposed to be safe, but safety never lasts long in a world built on betrayal. The flagship that carried the Regent's crest should have been dead, drifting metal, no power, no command. Yet deep inside its burning frame, a final protocol had come alive. The first explosion hit before anyone could react. Windows shattered, alarms screamed, and the floor lurched beneath their feet. The human reached the princess's bed just as the emergency lights cut out. "What is it?" she gasped. "The flagship," he said, already grabbing her stretcher. "It's moving." He could feel the rumble through the walls, a deep, growing thunder. Outside, through the shattered glass of the medical bay, the stars tilted. The dreadnought was accelerating. "Straight toward the palace. All personnel evacuate." The comms blared. "Impact in 90 seconds." The medics scattered. The princess struggled against the straps, her glow flashing red. "We can't outrun it." "We can try," he said. He overrode the locks, forced the doors open, and began pushing the stretcher down the smoke-filled corridor. The walls shook, ceiling dust raining down like snow. Behind them, the alarms wailed their countdown. 80 seconds. The young pilot from the orbital gardens appeared at the far end, shouting, "The royal yacht! Engines cold but still docked." 70 seconds they ran. The human's lungs burned as he pushed, his prosthetic arms sparking under strain. Every hallway was chaos. Guards shouting, children crying, the sound of the palace breaking apart. 50 seconds. They reached the launch bay. The pilot was already inside the cockpit, fingers flying over the controls. The human shoved the stretcher through the airlock, slammed the seal, and strapped the princess down beside him. 40 seconds. The engines whined. Power building. Through the viewport, the dreadnought filled the sky, a mountain of burning steel falling like a god. 30 seconds. Go! The human shouted. The yacht detached from the clamps and roared forward, the sudden thrust pressing them into their seats. The pilot fought the controls as the shockwave hit, rolling the ship sideways. The human reached out, steadying the princess as fire bloomed across the palace below. Then came the impact. The dreadnought slammed into the eastern wing of the palace, a wall of fire swallowing towers and gardens. The shockwave chased them into the sky, slamming against the yacht's shields. Every alarm screamed red. The hull rattled. For a moment, it felt like the entire ship would tear apart. Then silence. They were in orbit again, the planet below them burning at the edges. The princess stared out the window, her glow gone pale gray. "The eastern wing," she whispered. 300 years of history, gone. The human didn't answer. He looked at the destruction spreading across the capital, the smoke rising from shattered towers, the sparks that had once been lives. After a long time, she turned to him. "How many made it out?" "Enough," he said quietly, though he didn't know if it was true. She nodded once, then straightened, pain tightening her jaw. "Get me to the command ship. If the fleet sees me alive, they won't strike again." He wanted to tell her to rest. He wanted to tell her she'd done enough. But the look in her eyes said otherwise. So he set his jaw, turned the yacht toward the fleet, and pushed the engines harder. Behind them, the palace burned. Half of it gone, half of it still standing, just like its queen. The command ship's bridge fell silent when the yacht docked. Officers stopped mid-sentence, eyes wide as the princess stepped through the airlock, pale, wounded, but alive. Her gown was scorched, her shoulder bound in shimmering bandages. Behind her walked the human, blood still on his hands, eyes hard as stone. The captain knelt first. "My princess." "The palace burns, but the fleet stands ready. What are your orders?" The princess looked out through the glass dome where the wreck of the flagship glowed faintly in orbit. Her voice was quiet, but it carried through the deck like thunder. "The regent is dead. The rebellion ends now. Send a message to every ship. The sapphire throne still stands." Her words moved through the calms like fire. One by one, the remaining enemy vessels powered down their weapons, drifting into surrender. The blockade was broken. When it was done, she turned to the human. "You've changed everything," she said. "You ended a war that began before you were born." He shook his head. "You ended it. I just made sure you lived long enough to do it." She smiled faintly, her glow softening to gold. "Earth will not forgive you for this. They'll recall you. Brand you a traitor." He met her gaze without fear. "Then let them." He pulled up his wrist display, typed a few words, and sent a message across the stars. "To Earth Xeno Division Command," it read. "Effective immediately, Agent Emerson resigns. All loyalty transferred to the sovereignty of the Sapphire Throne. Any attempt at interference will be treated as an act of war." The signal vanished into deep space. He crushed the device in his hand. "I'm yours now," he said simply. The princess blinked, her glow deepening. "You don't understand what that means," she whispered. "Bonding isn't a word. It's a law. Once it's done, you belong to me and I to you. Our bodies, our minds, even our thoughts will link." He didn't look away. "Then we finish it." The captain brought the ceremonial blade, its edge glowing with faint blue light. The princess sliced a shallow line across her palm. The human did the same. When their hands met, the cut burned, not from pain, but from something deeper. Energy flowed between them, a living current that reached into every cell, rewriting both of them. He gasped. His heartbeat stumbled, then steadied, matching hers. He could feel her pulse echoing in his chest, her scent flooding his senses like fire and rain. She inhaled sharply, eyes wide. "You're connected. I know," he whispered. "I can feel you." The golden glow from her skin spread to him, tracing silver lines along his arms where human flesh met machine. Their breaths synchronized. The deck lights dimmed as if the ship itself bowed in respect. When the bond sealed, the princess turned to her crew. "You are all witnesses," she said. "The human is no longer an outsider. He is law. He is my consort." The officers saluted, heads bowed. The human met her gaze again, still dizzy from the merging of two worlds. "What now?" he asked. She smiled, tired but fierce. "Now we rebuild and we make sure no one ever forgets who we are." 6 weeks passed. The war was over, but peace came with its own weight. The palace was half ruins and half rebirth. Smoke no longer curled over the city. Instead, cranes and lightcraft moved through the dawn, rebuilding what had burned. The sapphire throne had been melted in the blast, but the people carved a new one from the wreckage of the regent's ship. Its frame still shimmered faintly with battle scars, a reminder that power meant survival, not perfection. The princess ruled from the command ship during the reconstruction, her wounded shoulder healing faster than any doctor thought possible. The bond between her and the human had changed her, strengthened her. And it had changed him too. The silver lines beneath his skin glowed faintly whenever she entered the room, pulsing in rhythm with her light. They no longer needed translators or words. They could feel each other's thoughts, emotions, and warnings before they formed. He used his new role not as a soldier, but as a builder. His knowledge of Earth's systems became a bridge instead of a weapon. He helped integrate stealth technology into the Varillian fleet, not for conquest but for protection. He coordinated reconstruction crews, rebuilt the sensor networks, and trained new guards who learned from his silence instead of his commands. The court watched in uneasy awe. The human who once stood behind the throne now stood beside it, and the princess, no, the queen, treated him as her equal. Those who plotted quickly learned he could read their fear before they even spoke. No one dared whisper rebellion in a court that smelled of truth. 3 moons later, they stood together on the rebuilt balcony overlooking the capital. The air was clear, the gardens alive again with song. The queen wore a new harness of woven silver and blue glass, her scars visible, unhidden. He wore no armor, only a simple uniform marked with the sigil of both their worlds. "Earth sent another message," he said quietly, watching the horizon. "They've closed my file. Declared me lost to biological assimilation." The queen's glow warmed to gold. "So they've accepted what they fear most, a human who stopped belonging only to them." He smiled faintly. "They fear what they can't control." She turned to him, tracing the silver lines on his arm with her claws. "You were once a blank scent," she said. "Now you carry ours. You're proof that peace isn't built from purity. It's built from change." He looked at her then, really looked. The woman who had once been a mission was now a kingdom, a future, a heartbeat he could feel inside his own chest. "We broke their cycle," he said. "We built something new." The queen leaned close, her forehead resting against his. "Then let's keep building," she whispered. Below them, the city lights began to rise, glowing brighter with each passing moment until the whole world seemed to breathe again. The old palace was gone. The conspiracies were dead. What remained was a new dawn, one born not from fire or fear, but from 2 people who had learned to trust across silence and species. And above the rising sun, the rebuilt sapphire throne shimmered, no longer a symbol of power alone, but of something far stronger, unity that could not be misread.